up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you are reading? Philip asked. How can I, he said, unless someone explains it to me? So he invited Philip to come up and to sit with him. That is our scripture for today. And so we have a few characters within this story, a few people that I want to make sure that we really shine a light on to understand who these people are. So what are the characters? Anybody remember any characters from what we read? Who were the people? Okay, one, we got Philip. Who else do we have? The Ethiopian eunuch. Who else? Yep, exactly. We have the angel of the Lord, and then we also have the Spirit. They're all referenced within this passage, and they all play different roles. But let's focus on the Ethiopian eunuch. What does the word tell us about this particular eunuch? Anything in particular? What did you grasp about him? Maybe his occupation, maybe what he does for a living. What do you know? What do we know about him? Man of authority. He worked in the treasury, so he had money, or he had access to money. It may not have been his, but he worked with money, right? And where was he headed? He was headed home, but where was he coming from? He was coming from Jerusalem, where he was worshiping, right? So we have this eunuch. He was worshiping, having this amazing worship experience, and now he's on his way home back to Ethiopia, where he has this big wig job of being the treasurer to the queen of Ethiopia. And so in this moment, he's reading this word and he does not understand it. So what happens? God sends Philip, and Philip goes, right? Let's go back to the word in verse 26. It says, now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. Verse 27, so he started out, and I want to stop right there. So the angel of the Lord told him to do what? To go. And to go where? From Jerusalem to Gaza. Why? He told him to do that. Why? He didn't say. He was sent, and he didn't know why he was going. He was told to go and had no direction, no detail. The Spirit just said, just go on this road and go south. He really don't even got a destination. It says towards. If you hop on I-95 North, it'll say you're going towards Washington, D.C., but that don't mean that it's close, right? So he was given this instruction, and he just went without any detail, without any direction, without any further instruction. He said, okay, God, if you say go, I'm going to go. If you say go south, I'm going to go south, and I'm going to keep going until you speak to me again. Now, the question is for you, could God tell you to go? And furthermore, would he have assurance that if he just happened to make your path pass by someone who's struggling with the word, would he be sure that you would stop? Like, think about that. He said go, and granted the Spirit later said go to that chariot, but what we find is that he went, but while he was following the instruction, he still had the love in his heart. He still had the desire to help people. He still was open enough to say, oh, that person's struggling, maybe I should help them. And so how many times when we're living are we so focused on what God may have told us to do that we forget to act out being a follower of Christ? God said, go and do this one thing. And we said, well, we're so tunnel vision. We're going to do this. 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 But we forget to look around at who we can help along the way. We forget to look around and say, who can we exemplify or show love to as we're on this path? And I think looking at how Philip conducted himself is so important because he's still on a mission for God. God said go south. He's going south. But as we continue in verse 27, it says, so he started out, and on his way, he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury. This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship. Just happened to meet this man on the way. Let's keep moving here. How many times have you been told to go and you didn't? Somebody's honest in the back. How many times have you been told to call someone and you didn't? How many times have you been told to go, to make time, to visit with someone, but you didn't? And as we bring this whole thing around, how many souls were sacrificed because we didn't? What if he said, Lord, I can't go and tell you unless you tell me where? This eunuch would have been sitting on the side of the road with a hunger, with a thirst for understanding, but having none there because we didn't do and hold up our end of the bargain. He did his job. He went to worship and he came back with a desire to learn more. God did his part. He sent you. But we said, that don't make no sense. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Why do I need to get up and call this person? It's 4 p.m. I'm supposed to be getting ready to go to church. Why would I go and visit a family member in need? How many people are lost or sacrificed because of our disobedience? Here's another one. How much understanding is lost because we won't help? How many times do we say as church people, well, I had to sit there and learn it myself, so you can do it too. I had to sit there and try to figure it out and go call pastor. Why don't you go call pastor? I ain't got time to help you. How many times do people come to us for understanding, but because of our pride, we don't want to help, or we don't desire to help? Or better yet, we rely upon the sheep to open up their mouth and ask, versus us being more mature, understanding what they're going to, offering, saying, hey, did that make sense to you? Because it ain't make no sense to me, and I've been in this thing for a long time. How many times do we make the newest disciples among us feel uncomfortable and feel like they should understand? Well, we know we ourselves don't know what that person up there is talking about. But we up here looking as holy as we can, flipping this. He done told us to turn to Habakkuk, and we flip it like we know where we going, knowing we don't know where that book is in the Bible. How many more people would have a better experience with church if we were just more humble and we understood, honest, exactly, and we allowed them to see that it's okay to ask questions. In fact, this is the place for us to ask questions. And last question I have for you, how much love is lost because we don't go out searching for opportunities to show love, searching for ways for us to give to others, searching for ways for us to open up our arms to random people and help them feel a little bit better about the tough life that we know they are going through. You see, this eunuch in the Bible, he just left worship. He just left this amazing moment with God, but he's struggling. He just left this encounter with God, but he doesn't understand the book. The church service just got over. They just got finished singing his song. They just had this amazing experience, and he doesn't understand. Think about that. Think about how you would feel as a person in a high position in which you're supposed to know everything. You're supposed to be able to understand the writings of the law. You're supposed to do these things, and you come back from this religious high, and yet you still don't understand. How many of us would let that moment pass and say, well, I dare not ask. I'm not going to raise my hand and let pastor know that I don't know. I'm not going to raise my hand and sound like a fool in front of all these church people. How many times do we let love, understanding, or anything else fall by the wayside because we won't lay down our pride and say, I don't understand like this eunuch did? Let's go back to the word. Verse 29. The Spirit told Philip, okay, so now the Spirit's hopping in and telling Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. What did the Spirit tell him? Did the Spirit say talk to him? Did the Spirit say break down the word? For how many of us could God say, go stand near that car and know that we would understand what that person needs and wouldn't stop at staying near it and say, do you need help with that big book you're reading? Could he send you? Could he send you to that car in the Walmart parking lot? Could he send you to that cart in the Target store where that person is flipping through, listening to some TD Jakes, rolling their eyes because they don't know what he's talking about? And could God say, walk next to that cart? And I know if I tell you to get close enough, I know you'll do the rest. Why is our faith in such a box? To where if God told us to go do something, he can't just tell us for the purposes of getting into position, but he has to tell us to get into position and then tell us what to do. Shouldn't we be almost on autopilot to where everywhere I go, there's an atmosphere of God? Everywhere I go, there's an atmosphere of faith. Everywhere I go, there's an atmosphere of prayer. So all I have to do, all God has to do is say, just get close to that chair, because I know your atmosphere will do the rest. But we have to be so minutely told for us to take action. What if our default was to take action? Then God's job is just to get us into position, because he knows we'll take care of the action part. What if we had lived a life like Philip? Let's go back to verse 29. The Spirit told Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. Then Philip ran up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. And then he said, do you understand what you are reading? God didn't tell him to say that. Did God tell him to say anything? Did God tell him to witness? Did God tell him to get in this man's space and sit next to him? He did that on his own. He said, do you understand what you're reading? Philip asked. And the eunuch said, how can I unless someone explains it to me? So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. How many of you feel like just because you went to church, you should understand? This guy just left church. He should understand it, right? He should be able to rightly divide the word, right? Just because he was here, just because he had this experience, just because he went to church, right? Isn't that what we feel like? Because we show up every Sunday, we're supposed to know everything. This eunuch is showing us that it's okay. There are going to be some things we understand, and there are going to be some things we don't understand. And there is nothing wrong with us laying down our pride, raising our hand and being humble and saying, I didn't get that, Pastor. Can you run back through it? And the good part about our church is our pastor knows. Like, he can actually explain it and tell you exactly what it means, exactly where it came from. He can actually explain it, but what he can't do is read your mind and be able to break it down if you don't ask him. Now, if your face looks like you don't understand enough, maybe he'll just say, look, think you need some help and do it. But we have to get to a position where we feel like we can ask the question. Transparent moment. So I remember there was one experience I had, and when you're up here teaching, you feel like you should know everything, right? You feel like you should understand everything. You should be able to answer every question. But one area I had to grow in was understanding that I'm not going to have every answer. That's why we have a senior pastor. That's why we have a person that knows it from front of the book to back of the book. And so for sometimes I have to be humble enough to say, that's a great question. Pastor, where you at? But that's not just for being up here. That's for even in the seats that you sit in, whether you are in the house or online, being able to be bold enough to raise your hand and say, I don't know, help me. Because if you don't do that here within the safety of these four walls, what are you going to do outside in the world? What are you going to do when real situations hit? What are you going to do when you actually run into big problems? If you're not willing to raise your hand and here with your church family, are you going to do it out there in the world? Are you going to do it at your job? Are you going to do it when you're trying to start that business? So this is your training ground for everything that you do in life, for you to be able to be bold enough to say, that didn't make sense. Make it make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense still, maybe it's something you shouldn't believe in. But we've been so taught that it's a one-way conversation. But it's a two-way conversation with God. And he's not so fearful of you asking questions that he won't answer them for you. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, let's go to the word. Let's see what it has to say about this. Let's go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. It says, ask and what? Seek and what? Knock and what? So why aren't we asking questions? Why aren't we looking for truth? Why aren't we knocking on doors that we think are closed? Why are we just sitting here receiving whatever comes here versus trying to dive in and understand it for ourselves, right? Does that make sense? Does that only make sense to me? Y'all quiet. Does that only make sense to me? Y'all know I keep asking till y'all respond. All right, so here's a question for you. What happened first? Philip being sent or the eunuch struggling to understand? Philip being sent. Anybody else have any other opinions? What do you think happened first, Lily? Struggling to understand. Anybody else? What y'all think? What's your question? Who's, who sent you to that door? How'd you get to that door? Well, how do you know? You were knocking on Satan's door and God's door? Well, so first and foremost, like we have to understand that in all things that we do, we should be led by God, right? And so when we're knocking on doors, we should first look at the door to say, does this door align with the word? Is this me trying to take things under my own power? Me trying to take a power away from God and saying, I'm going to do this on my own? Is this me trying to meander or trying to get over on people so I can get ahead? Or does everything about this door line up with the word? And if it does line up with the word, well, then we go to confirmation. God, if this is the door for me, can you confirm it? Can you confirm that this job is the one you should take from me? God, if this is the door for me, let them give me 14 days of paid time off versus 10. Well, it only had 10. I guess it ain't for me, right? Is your God big enough to confirm it for you before you just go knocking on every door that looks square, right? So we have to be able to stand upon God and wait on God. If we're really serious about God moving, then we should be having a conversation with him before we even put our hand to the door, right? To make sure it is where we're supposed to be. And then through confirmation, we see it all over in the Bible. God confirmed this for me. If this is you, let this happen. If this is you, let this happen. If this is you, move in this way. And then through those different tools, either God will speak to you, either God will confirm it to you, or you're going to wait on God to make sure it's the right thing for you. Does that make sense? What's up? Ooh, what does that mean to you? Yes. Can you repeat that? Can you turn on number 3, Mom? Okay. So what do you do when you're hard pressed, when things seem like you have to make a decision, you have to move, you can't stand still anymore? Now, the first question I have for you, and it's a personal question, you don't have to answer this. Do you believe that God will supply all your needs? So if you believe that God will supply all your needs, is there such thing as hard pressed? Tell me more.
You don't. Sometimes you be in situations you don't know what to do, but you do what your church say do. Pray.
So let me give you an example. So let's say you have $1,000,000 in the bank, right? And there's two people. One person has $1,000,000 in the bank. One person has $0 in the bank. And they go grocery shopping, and they get up to the front thing, and they're watching that little ticker with the total go higher and higher. If the number ends up being $500, and the person who's a millionaire who has $1,000,000 in the bank, are they hard pressed? Do they have any worries about,
Person with the money in the bank?
yeah,
No, they not hard pressed.
the person who doesn't? Are they worried or concerned?
Yes,
Why?
because they don't believe in God.
No, no, no. Put God aside. We just talking about the dollars in the bank, what you have access to.
Okay, if they don't have access to it, yeah, they hard pressed because they gonna like, how could I pay for this?
Exactly. So if you have faith that God is going to supply all your needs, then do you have access to it or do you not?
To faith?
No,
No.
to whatever it is that you need for this time in your life.
Yeah, I have access to it.
So if you truly believe in that, I'm not talking about like it sounds good in the book. I'm not talking about it sounds good to say on Sunday morning. But if you really believe that God's going to come through, do you still feel that way?
Sometimes I don't. I know, like, now I be putting myself in situations like this. If I know that it don't happen for me, what I prayed for, then I say to myself, hey, God didn't want you to have if he didn't do it.
Gotcha. And so
So-
this is where I want us to get to. This isn't about saying that you don't have faith. This is us acknowledging that there are levels to faith. Where we aspire to, where we should be, is to the point where even if I have 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and 1,000 people, I don't feel like I have lack because I know what my God can do through me. That's what we aspire to. But I want us to be honest with ourselves to say, we ain't always there. We don't always feel like that. There are times and moments where our faith wavers. And it's okay to say that out loud. It's okay to say, I'm aspiring to have this amazing and great faith. But today, in this moment, when the rubber meets the road, God, I don't see it and I'm starting to worry. And it's that conversation that you have to be honest enough to have with your Father in heaven. But the way you have that conversation is, God, I know you'll supply all my needs. I know I'm worrying right now, but your word says this, and I have faith in this, and I know that your word is true. And by virtue of that, I am looking and searching for a way for you to come through in this way. Go ahead.
Finish.
Sure.
Wait.
No, go ahead. Go
All
ahead.
right, I know it might sound kind of a little crucial when I say this, but sometimes I be getting in them little modes like, you know what, trusting God is hard. God's side is hard, so sometimes I just want to throw the towel in like, this ain't this, but I know that's not the right thing.
Is it though?
to
Is it
do.
not?
Yeah, something like living the truthful, trying to be transparent with God. Yeah, cause God ain't gonna make it easy for you. Everything gonna pretty much be tough.
I don't know if I agree with that particular
Why?
statement, but what I do want everyone to get out of this is the authenticity of our relationship with God. God can't do nothing with your, quite frankly, lies. God can't do nothing with you trying to make excuses for him. Like, our faith in God is something that moves and changes with time. Let's just be honest, right? Some days we feel more faith-filled than others. And God is big enough to understand that. He's a heavenly Father, right? And our Father, if you're lucky enough to have an earthly father, understands the moments and the nuances of our faith. And so although we are all aspiring to have that bulletproof faith, and yes, continue to aspire, continue to move forward, continue to pray and try to get there. If you have a moment where you're weak, if you have a moment where things look like they're falling apart, that's still the conversation you have with your God to say, God, I don't see how it's going to work. I'm believing within you in lip service right now, and I just need for you to come through. So what I don't want you to walk away from this conversation thinking that, or continuing to think that that's a horrible thing. Your God understands who you are. He understands your experiences. He understands where you are in your faith. And having that conversation isn't bad, doesn't show negatively on him, as long as you continue to stand on his word and feed him his word. God, your word says this. So I'm looking around and I don't see it.
Well, maybe I said it wrong, but I'm basically just saying that when I get in situations, I be like get frustrated or whatever. I don't wait. I'm not patient. But you know, you got to wait on God.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I go wrong. I'm not patient.
Mm-hmm.
I be wanna like, okay, if this don't happen, I wanna just go move and do it on my own. But I know that ain't what I'm supposed to do. How you want God to work if you're not gonna be patient and wait for Him? So I'm learning it right now to just wait and stay still. But you know, about a month ago, I was in a situation like I had a decision to make. I was talking to God about it or whatever. God wasn't answering me.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the answer right then, so I got frustrated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I'm still learning to wait for God.
Got it.
To wait on Him, because if I do it on my own, it's not gonna work. But if I include Him in it, it's gonna work.
And I think that's the thing too. For us in our walk, we have to understand what we're looking at. And it sounds like you're self-aware to understand that that's an area that you need to fix in your life, right?
Yes.
But I think another level of maturation in that is that if I want to move this chair and I'm not strong enough to move it, so then I start kicking it and I start to see it move, right? Okay, the next chair I come to that gets stuck, what am I going to do? I'm going to kick it. But part of maturation is to look back and see that things really work out. And so when we take things out of God's hands and we do it ourselves, let's say Sarah and Abraham, right? They went and tried to make their own baby on their own with their little handmaiden, and they did that. And so one could say that that worked out, but in the end, did it really work out? And if you don't look back on your life, then you'll think that that avenue that you took, that action that you took, taking it out of God's hands because it was, 2 minutes left on the clock and you had to make a decision, a lot of times we never look back to say, wait a second, that didn't work out at all. And so the next time when we get into a tight situation, we don't see it as it really is, which it's God way or something horrible. We still think that there's an option for us to do it our way. And by continuing to give life to our way, thinking that it's even going to give us a moment of gratification, is how we continue to put pressure on ourselves to make that decision. Does that make sense? You see what I'm trying to say there? Like, I wish I could say it the way I'm thinking it. We think we have God's way, our way, and do nothing. And we don't want to do nothing because we're impatient. We already said that. But we think that our way is an option, because we think it gets us a step closer. If there was a sign plastered on our way that said, this is going to take you 20 years back, would you still open that door? Would you still go through that? If it said, this is going to take you 20 years back, this is going to cost you $20,000 extra, this is going to put you this much further away from your purpose and your goals, would you still think it's an option? But we don't look at our choices that way. We don't look at our plan A. But so part of our maturation is, yes, we should be more patient, but we also should be able to look at our decisions with clarity enough to say, it looks good, but this is really going to screw my life up. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think if we're able to attack both of those angles, both the patient side, as well as truly looking at what our life looks like if we do mess this thing up, then I think it'll make it a little bit easier for us to make the right decisions. Does that make sense? Did I help you at all?
Yeah, help me. Like I said, I know my problem. I'm not patient at all with nothing. So I'm working on it.
How?
How I'm working on it to just sit my butt down and feel.
Okay.
Like,
that'll work.
Let God move and stop trying to move on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna fail every time. If I do it, it's my way. But if I do it His way, guess what? I'm gonna win.
There you go. I love it. Any other question? I love that question. Any other questions out there? What you got?
Oh, well. I kind of like want to piggyback a little bit. Okay. I piggyback a little bit. It's like that. I used to be in that situation like when he said, seek and you shall find, and knock and your door shall be open. I kind of like had that kind of confused for a while. So it's like sometimes when I see God doing something or something happen, and I kind of get in that moment, like that frustration moment, and then I have to ask God, I say, if it's for me, then you give me a sign. If it's not for me, then I know it's not for me. But then sometimes it get harder and harder, but sometimes it don't be my problem. It be somebody else's problem. Then I take that load on me, and I know what God said He'll do. But here I am trying to figure out what can I do to, to do that with that person, to help that person. And then here I am, I'm like, I'm level head on my side, but this side over here is hard, And then if I can't fix that problem, then another problem come, and another problem come, and another problem. And it's like they adding on, they putting all their problems in my lap. So I'm like, what to do with that part, So it's like, I kind of get in that part when he says seeking, and knocking the door be open. But it's like sometimes it be like my life is real hard, like trying to be that center person for everybody, and trying to hold a load for them. And it's like, to me, I don't think if nobody put their load on me, I'd be okay because I'd be focused on God. But sometimes when they put their load on me, it get hard for me to be trying to deal with their problem and my problem at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of like learning to how to lean on God and try to, take those things away.
You had something to add to that or something different? Well, let me talk to her. So first and foremost, I think one of the things that as Christians we have to properly define is what tools do we have on our tool belt. So we obviously have money, we have wisdom of knowledge that we can speak, we have prayer, we have fasting, those types of things. And I think we as Christians sometimes almost take the power of prayer and force it down on that totem pole because people want something tangible. People may come and ask you for money, so we give them money. People may come and ask you for time, so we give them time. But should prayer not be higher on that list? And why do we kind of push that down so low? And the reason why I'm telling you this, because it sounds like people have come and asked you for time, asked you for money, asked you for resources and all of these things. And it keeps going over and over and over and over again. And they won't be happy if you give them prayer, if they need their bill paid. But is that really the best thing that you can give them? Is there more power there, even more power there that exists there versus the money that you're giving them, versus the time that you're giving them? And so my request to you would be, how do we reprioritize those things? Sometimes at the expense of people liking you or caring for you or wanting or you being their best person or favorite person in the world. But maybe if we reorient those things, maybe you'll find that those calls stop. Maybe you'll find that you actually can help them in a way that can sustain them versus giving them $5, they squander it, giving them $50, they squander it, and they're back time and time again. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am. Patience is not in our nature. It's not in our nature. And especially the older we get, the more and more society moves forward, the more instant gratification we want. We want it now. We want it now. We want it now. So why and how we fix that is to just get inside of the Word. Get into the Word. And if you increase your faith that God hears you, increase your faith that God will respond to you, then you're able to sustain yourself more through that patient season than anything else. But I'm not going to stay here and tell you that patience is easy or patience is going to get easy. It's something that's just difficult.
I would say I would answer the question online. I just say the flesh is real weak, cause I'm in that situation. Like I say, being patient is kind of crazy. So it's the flesh, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to add to that, Pastor? Well, give us a little bit of it.
The first thing you have to understand, the Bible says patience worketh tribulation. The more patience you ask for, the more you're going to have to go through, because that's how you build your faith, is through tribulation. So patience brings that upon us. So we don't ask God for patience. We ask God for more faith. But if you go back to the discussion earlier about why you get impatient and why you want to run to do things, the teacher says study the Word of God, and that cannot be more important than it is in that stage right there. If you can just bear with me for a moment and just look at Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 20, it simply says, but God is able to do abundantly and exceedingly above all that you could hope, think, or wish, according to the power that worketh where? In you. And then continue in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 8, Paul says, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. We're down, but not defeated. All these things, he's found himself to be content where he is, rather than getting impatient, rather than rushing on. He's content where, and why is he content there? Because he says in Philippians 4 and 19, I asked you to be patient, that's what this looks like. In 4 and 19, he's content because his God shall supply all his needs. And he rests there. That makes sense? Do you understand that even when you're not getting what you're asking for, you're trusting God enough to wait? And there's a difference between patience and waiting on the Lord. Okay? No. Ask for faith and then learn to wait in your faith. Because in due season, Galatians 6 and 9, in due season you shall reap what you sow if you faint not. So you just wait on the Lord, be of good cheer, and he's going to give you the desires of your heart. I'm sorry.
No worries. Perfect. So this Ethiopian eunuch, he's sitting here, he just left worship, and he's riding on his chariot reading the book of Isaiah and does not understand what the heck it means. While he's sitting here in this moment, while he has a situation that he doesn't understand, while he has a rough place or a rough patch, what word did you use? While he's hard pressed in this moment, God has already sent an answer. It just ain't got there yet. So the question is, how long did he sit there turning those pages, not making heads or tails and not understanding it, while Philip was already on his way? So that's the story of patience. Granted, he didn't ask God for what he thought he needed. So perhaps the whole patient timer didn't go off in his mind. But I think the faith story is about God knows what you need well before you even recognize it. You're responding to this pink slip you got in the mail, but God saw it when the guy put it in the mailbox. God saw it when they had talked about it in the conference room beforehand. And so God has already worked that thing on out. It's just that we think that it's so important. We think that it's such a big problem. And God said, you got 3 more weeks of savings. You already got 3 checks in the mail that I'm sending you. I've already worked these things out. I'm just watching you go through this experience and asking you, is your faith enough to sustain you through it? Or will you throw away everything because you feel like you have to go and fix some problem that I've already worked out? What if the eunuch just threw the book over and said, I can't do this, and threw it? And then Philip showed up. And then he's walking beside the chariot, and he doesn't hear any reading. So he just follows his chariot for 15 miles, his leg falls off. Like, what if that's how the story went? Yes, ma'am. Yes. I don't know God's will for your life, but what I want us to understand is that, like, we think it's just, I need to make something happen, let me do something. But you got a God up there that's doing stuff for you. Why do you feel like you have to make it happen, make it work? Because at the end of the day, you can't add a hair to your head. You can't add a day to your life. So what are you really doing? You're just out here doing stuff. You don't even know if it's going to work out. You're just putting your hands to activity, hoping that because you're in action or motion, you're doing something to move life ahead, which probably can't be further from the truth, right? All right, so we got this eunuch. We're going to get back. I'm so excited about this eunuch, y'all, and y'all won't let me get to it. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Y'all just really put something on my mind. Me and my jobs, like, today just proved the point. Like, God just revealed to me, just sit down and wait on me. Stop going out there searching. I'm going to send it to you for a job-wise.
Wow. And here's the thing for you, Jessica. When we talk about discerning God's will, it always comes back to, does it align with God's word? Is it flesh or is it God, right? And so a lot of times you can find out really easily by just asking yourself, does it align with God's word? How many times have you told yourself to sit down and wait on God? That's probably not your flesh speaking, right? But how many times have you told yourself, well, you just need to get in action. You just need to do something. You just need to just go and figure something out. That don't really sound much like God, does it? So when we filter our life and our decisions through what's according to God's will and what's not, a lot of times that can help us get the confirmation we seek. Did you have a question back there? Did you have a question? What's up?
When is children's church?
Children's church is getting started in about 20 minutes. I love our children. There you go. Ask and you shall receive. So we've established that the eunuch is having this difficult time reading, and God's already sent Philip. And we've also established that when Philip shows up, the eunuch is struggling to understand. But let's look at the character of this eunuch. The eunuch is an important person struggling to understand, but he has a heart to learn. He's trying. He didn't just go to worship and say, well, I'm just going to, next time I pick up the book is when I show up to worship next time. He left the worship and is in his book trying to learn. God has already sent him help, and he didn't even have to ask for it. Didn't even have to ask for it because God already knew. God said, oh, look at that servant down there. He do not know what he's doing. He is making a wreck out of this. Let me say, Philip, come here. Help this brother out, right? That's what happened. And so one question I had for you, we've been focused on what Philip's doing, but let's focus on the eunuch for a second. For how many of you is your Bible an inside book? And what I mean by that, how many of you have ever read your Bible, not inside the church, not inside the house, but somewhere else? This eunuch was reading his Bible riding down the road out loud. This eunuch was reading his Bible in the park driving somewhere. But for a lot of us, we regulate our Bible to, okay, I may dust it off and bring it out to service. I may dust it out and read it when I'm watching something holy online. But in between those two times, for some of us, we never bring out our Bible. And for how many of us do we miss out on opportunities for us to witness to other people because they've never seen the book in our hand? I'll tell you a story. I was in a coffee shop when I first moved down here. I was probably studying for Thursday night service, and I just had the Bible sitting there on the counter. I went to go get my food and came back. And by the time I came back, one of the servers was there and was like, hey, are you a minister? Like, just because I had a Bible sitting there, she thought, well, you had to be a minister, because if you were just a regular person, you wouldn't have that Bible. You wouldn't have that Bible sitting there. Think about what that means. And because of that, she was like, well, can you pray for my son? He's working through an addiction. How many conversations would be started if you just had the book with you? How many doors would that open? How many conversations would that start? But we don't want to start those conversations, right? We just like to have it in our phone, so it's just for us, but maybe it's not for you. Maybe the greatest thing about the book is just the symbol on the front and what it means to others, because you're already saved. We're supposed to be making disciples of all nations, right? Tough questions that need answers. Now, one question I have, and we're going to have to wrap this up because we did not even get to the good part. My question for you is, do you got any game left? Got any game left? So when y'all was younger, and we learned about some people over this past weekend that had some game. But when you was younger, you used to be able to talk to whoever, just run up and talk to them, start a conversation, find some common ground, and get a date out of that one conversation. For some of the females in the room, you would be able to have a whole conversation with the person from across the room without having said anything and get a free drink out of it. Am I right? Am I right? Don't act like y'all weren't there. We were able to start these conversations in the world. But when we're talking about making disciples, how many of us have lost all of our game? Our ability to start a conversation. Just start a conversation. We're not talking about the destination. We're talking about just starting a conversation. If you're really about God's work, really about making disciples, what kind of game you got? Don't get quiet now. What kind of game you got? Right? We done lost all of our game because we can't use our game. Think about Philip. Philip was told to walk beside this chariot like a creeper, right? Let's say you were at Walmart walking beside somebody's car, close enough to listen to them reading the Bible. How creepy is that? But Philip was able to start a conversation because Philip got game. Y'all got game? Y'all got game? Y'all got some sad game from the sounds of it. So I'm going to give y'all some classified stuff. Don't tell Pastor. I used to have some game. Don't tell my wife I used to have some game. But I'm going to tell you how to start some conversations because it's so important that we're able to start these conversations. Yeah. It's so important that we're starting these conversations with people because we're supposed to make disciples. So this is how you would start a conversation with someone perhaps that you see super often. But it's a secret. Don't y'all be using my moves. Hey, how are you doing? It's not that complicated. Hey, how you doing? What are they going to say? Hey, how you doing? What do you say? You doing good? I love to hear that. And most of us walk off, right? Which tells the person what? You don't really care. By the time you say, fine, how you doing? I'm probably already past you, right? Do I really care about what you're saying? So I'm gonna share with you the move I put on all of y'all. I said, hey, how are you doing, right? You've heard me say this before. And what do you say? Fine. No, seriously. How are you doing? And I stop and wait. How many of y'all heard me say that before? And I say, and I'll probably say something like, I see you every day, and you usually smiling. Today seems a little different. What is going on in your world? I say it all the time. How many conversations, how many authentic conversations could you start like that? If you just waited for the answer and didn't take the BS they gave you up front, but said, no, I know you. Girlfriend, I know you. We work together every single day. I see you here every single day, and your smile is not the same. What's going on? And what does that do? That takes ownership from the conversation, from them, or from out of your hands. You did what you were supposed to do. Now, God, did you warm up their heart? God, did you make them open to this conversation? If so, they'll tell you everything going wrong in their life. If not, they'll say, no, I'm having a great day. No worries, keep it pushing. But how many people could we have touched if we did that every day this past week? Every day. How many? How many? Oh, okay. Now let's say it's a stranger, somebody you don't know. Hey, quick question for you. You got some time? Quick question for you. You got a minute? Quick question for you. It's kind of weird, but what can I pray for you about? If God's warmed up their heart, what would they say? My child, Lord, he's bad. My marriage is falling apart. If God hasn't warmed up their heart, nothing. Okay, no worries. I'll talk to you soon. Conversation starters. How can we actually be the hands and feet of God? You don't need to know the Bible cover to cover to pray for somebody. You don't need to know the Bible cover to cover to ask someone how they're really doing. All you have to do is care and actually love them. Does that make sense? So we're going to pick this back up because we didn't even get to my good part. But if there's one thing I want to leave with you from today, it's that we have to be able to be like Philip. One, to take requests from God and be able to have an atmosphere of love around us so that God just has to send us to the place. And if we get inside the place, we'll be able to witness on his behalf. Does that make sense? Any questions? I hope y'all got some game today. Y'all get some game? Yes, ma'am. Ooh, yeah. Because yeah, we'll finish it up on Thursday. We'll finish this. We'll finish up covering the eunuch on Thursday. Any questions before we close? Yes, ma'am. Oh, you're right. We can't because Thursday starts our anniversary. So y'all gonna have to wait. We're gonna finish it up at some time in the future. Any questions out there before we close? All right, thank you so much for joining us for Sunday School here at Harvest of Hope. I hope you stick around for our 11 a.m. Children's Church service. So we're going to be celebrating everything our kids have learned over the past month. So I hope you come back at 11 a.m. to see our amazing kids and what they've learned. I can't wait to see you hopefully next week, same time, for Sunday School here at Harvest of Hope. Have an amazing week.